Hello, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today, October 13th, for this webinar on financial elder abuse detection, intervention, and prevention. We're so glad you're here, and I could tell by the registration that there's a huge interest in this topic, and it seems to me that that interest is as much personal as it is professional. And I have my own story there, so I'm pretty sure this is what's going on here. We have a great speaker, and I will be introducing him in just a few minutes. You can see his name is Art Mason. He is a clinical social worker and director of Lifespan's Elder Abuse Prevention Program. He's worked in this field for over 26 years, so he has great information to share with all of us. Before getting started, I will point out that one of the most asked questions is whether you can have the slides. The slides, all of the slides are proprietary. They aren't shared, but that's why we record the webinar so all of you can watch it at your leisure, at your convenience, and take notes as you go if you don't get everything you wanted to get today. So, my name is Rita Wolfson. I am the founder of Financial Social Work and the Financial Therapy Network. We do these webinars to provide our ever-growing community with information that they can use personally and professionally to help themselves and to help their clients. And because of our large registration today, we know that there are those in the audience who aren't familiar with financial social work. So we will go over a little bit about it very quickly so we can get to Art. But first, we have 3 polls today. We do like the sessions to be as interactive as possible. So I am going to begin with this particular poll to find out who is in our audience. And as you see, if you haven't been listed in the 5 answers we're provided, you can go ahead to that question box and share your interest, the work you do right there. Okay, we're kind of split as these answers come in, and we will take another few seconds. 72% of you have voted. We'll give the rest of you. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so I will go ahead, and then maybe when I'm finished, Dorlee, if there are others, Dorlee is with us, and she's been a part of financial social work for the past 4 wonderful years, and we love having her. And so she can help tell us if you've written anything under question. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, about 85% of you have voted. So I will close that and I will share it with you. So we have about an equal number of therapists, counselors, and coaches, and human service and mental health providers. We definitely have advocates and others. I thought there might be more consumers joining us today, but then again, we are all consumers in our own way. Dorlee, have any of those 28% shared their work and
Yes.
interest?
We have a financial advisor,
Hmm.
MSW student, HIV case manager, a SHIP coordinator. Not sure what SHIP stands for. Do you know?
Uh,
SHIP.
I think it's the senior, maybe housings. It is a senior program. I'm pretty sure of that.
Okay. Home care agency, APS social worker, financial coach, renal social worker, state of Louisiana waiver services, LCSW working as a Ross service coordinator.
Okay, well, it's always fascinating to see who's joined us and the interest that various topics. Every month we do this free webinar and we try to keep them broad to appeal to as many people as possible in our financial social work community. So we'll go ahead and hide that. I will share with you some information on financial social work. Here we see the fact that financial problems are about so much more than money. And it all begins with a client's relationship with money and with self. And those are the pieces that contribute to a client's financial behavior. Financial behavior is how we earn, spend, save, share, and borrow. And those two pieces come together and determine a client's financial circumstances. So you can see that this is where that magic happens. And this is how we view financial well-being and helping men, women, clients of all ages, all demographics, to create sustainable long-term financial well-being. Because dollars and cents don't make financial choices. It's our inner money self. And if you've never thought about your inner money self, take a moment to do so and introduce yourself. And think about the fact that it isn't the dollars and cents that are making these decisions. It's that relationship we each have with our money and with ourselves. So financial circumstances originate from within that money self. And your money self includes your thoughts, feelings, and actions with your money and with yourself. And this particular graphic to the right of the screen says money is not the problem. It is our relationship with it that is the problem. And this is so true. So financial behavioral change requires a healthier money self, because someone with a healthier money self engages more readily, is more hopeful, is more eager to change, and is more prepared to succeed. And these are the components that help us, help clients create sustainable long-term financial well-being. So in order to develop a healthier money self, financial social work, our certification and our programs don't focus exclusively on the dollars and cents. Although, of course, to be able to successfully manage your money, you need to know the financial pieces of creating a money plan, of all of debt and credit. But we also explore self-acceptance, forgiveness, setting personal and financial boundaries, the fact that there is always hope, and how to focus on your inner strength and on being more positive. That's what financial social work is all about. And we try to help clients make peace with their money. Definitely a favorite graphic of mine for many years. A brief overview is the fact that it is an ongoing model that incorporates financial education, motivation, validation, and support. It is interactive, introspective, and strengths-based. It works equally well individually and or with groups, and is used by financial therapists. So our second poll, and then we're going to turn this over to our guest speaker. How many people in our audience have had a loved one, a client, or themselves experience some form of financial abuse? So let me put this up so you can vote, and let me launch this. And as I shared in the beginning, why this is a very meaningful and important topic, I believe, to so many people, but also to me, is the fact that this happened to my mother, and I had to go to court with her. She had dementia, and these caregivers took a great deal of money from her, and it was really sad and really frustrating. And I received one or two comments from people registering for the webinar mentioning that it doesn't only happen to the elderly, that it has happened to them. Okay, so 80% of you have voted. So I'll go ahead and count this down. If anybody else wants to vote, well, that's good. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Close it and share it, and you'll see that I said it was good that 20% of our audience has not known anyone or experienced this themselves. Unless you'd like to share anything else in that question box, and Dorley can tell us about it. I think you're probably all very ready to hear what our guest speaker has to say. So I am going to turn this over to you, Art Mason, and you can tell everyone a little more about yourself. I forgot to mention that. I hope you will do that as I change presenters here. Okay, changing presenters. Okay, you have that now, Art?
Wonderful. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me okay, Rita?
Absolutely great.
Fantastic. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining this webinar today. And although the official title is Financial Elder Abuse Detection, Intervention, and Prevention, this is the sum and substance of what I'll be talking about today on many different levels. I call this sort of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and mistreatment an emerging social issue because it really and truly is. And as you saw in the poll that Rita put out there, a number of individuals either have loved ones or themselves have been victimized. We see it in the press in many different forms, different stories, television, the newspaper, social media. But sadly, it is something that, for a number of reasons, seems to be growing in both frequency and severity as we go through time. So,
Art, do you have your? You need to put your slides up.
I thought my slides are up.
No.
But I think, did you change presenter? Or you have to do that change presenter screen button.
Sorry. I have Dorley. Show my.
Yes, yes.
Is that coming up now?
There yes. You go. Did we miss a slider? Right. Did we miss a slide or two? Go ahead back and just.
That's all right because this is okay. Really where the sum and substance of this
okay.
is.
Great.
So my question is, why is this important to the audience and really to our family, our loved ones, our clients, no matter what we do? And there's a number of different reasons for this. And one, let's look at the demographics, okay? The especially 80 to 85 and older group is the fastest growing cohort, and we all know what a cohort is, in American society. People are living longer, better health care, better nutrition, so therefore that financial Rita talked about before really becomes even more important. Many of these individuals, not all, but many are no longer working. Maybe they're volunteering or they're doing some side job, but there are more of them, and we need to be aware of that. Often we think, well, it's the kids, it's the young people that are the fastest growing group. No, people are living longer, and this is a reality. The baby boomers are aging, of which I am one. Like it or not, as much as we may be in denial, if you look at the Administration on Community Living, formerly the Administration on Aging, they peg a older adult at roughly age 60 and older. And so we have the baby boomers who are beginning to move into retirement, move into senior status, as we call it, and we have their parents in many cases who are still living longer. We have, in essence, ladies and gentlemen, what our agency calls, our program calls, an age tsunami coming. We need to prepare for this, and the key issue is financial exploitation, because if these people haven't been targeted already, like Rita's mom, you can bet that not only they, but vulnerable adults who are younger, who are more easily accessed, and with social media being as it is, are going to be targeted for a number of ways, by loved ones, family members, trusted individuals, and scammers. And we'll get to that in a little while. So the demographics, there's more skip generation families. Some of you out there who are listening in may deal with children or families. And what the skip generation is, and we're seeing more and more of this below the radar screen often, are grandparents raising grandchildren, or great-grandparents or aunts and uncles who are raising minors. And in some of the cases, what we see is that adult child, who is the parent of the younger than 18, maybe they have a drug addiction, maybe they have some financial needs, and what we're seeing in our caseload is those, say, 30, 40-year-old, 20-year-olds are financially dependent or financially exploitive of their elderly parents who have pensions, who have Social Security, but also may have been abusive in some way, shape, or form to their own adult children who are minors. So it's sort of a two-for-one, sadly. So we're seeing more of skip generation families form, and we're seeing exploitation in them also. In 2010, New York State did a study, the elder abuse prevalence study, and we looked at all forms of abuse: physical neglect, financial exploitation, verbal abuse, sexual abuse. And what we found was an amazing thing, that in terms of underreporting, only 1 out of every 44 cases, let me repeat that, only 1 out of every 44 cases of financial exploitation of older adults in the community is ever reported to authorities, law enforcement, adult protective services, district attorneys, AG's offices. That's a huge problem. They are out there. They are our relatives, our friends, our neighbors, sometimes ourselves. And yet these cases are not reported to authorities for a number of reasons, and we'll get to that a little bit later on too. Studies indicate, and it's a little murky, New York State just completed the cost of financial exploitation, and they estimate upwards as much as $1.5 billion is the cost in workers' times, lost resources, premature application for Medicaid, or public assistance, is the cost to the taxpayers and society. A study was done a number of years ago by MetLife. Upwards of $2.8 billion is lost annually. That is a huge, huge amount of money that our older citizens, our relatives, our friends, our neighbors are being victimized with. Something I really want you to be aware of: financial exploitation. Again, whether it's older adults or younger adults who are maybe vulnerable or have physical or cognitive impairments, often co-occurs with other types of abuse. It's the financial ones that, if we really look hard, we may see, because the bank statements, because the rent not being paid, because medications are not able to be accessed. But that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg, if you will. We look at it, and in fact, maybe also neglect is going on, or verbal abuse, threats. Turn over the ATM card to me, or you'll end up in a nursing home. Give me your PIN number, or I'm never going to visit you again, and that's what's keeping you in your home. So be aware. Financial exploitation is by far and away the most prevalent form of, as we call, abuse or elder mistreatment, yet it often co-occurs with other types of abuse. Little graphic here for all of you, little pretty graphic to give your eyes a rest. It's the tip of the iceberg, as we said. Only 1 out of 24 cases of all types of abuse, the New York State study found, are ever reported. 1 out of 44 financial, 1 out of 19 physical, 1 out of 24 overall. So it's out there. We have it in our practices. We need to be aware of it. Let's define the problem of all the types of abuse. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there's the various types of, all types of elder abuse except financial, including active and passive and self-neglect. And as I put with self-neglect, that's primarily adult protective services venue. But active non-accidental, non-consensual, willful infliction, willful failure. There has to be intent, and that's one of the three red flags that we look for. People have a right in our society, this is America, to make bad choices with their money. If I chose to get up out of my office and walk out the front door of my agency, open up my wallet and hand all of my cash to the first person that walked by, I think you'd all agree two things. Number one, I have an absolute right to do that, to make that financial decision for me. Number two, probably my wife would kill me when I got home, but I have a right to, in fact, do that. So people make choices with their money based on their inner selves, their values, their beliefs, what they want, and we may not agree with it as professionals. We may not think that that's a wise investment or a wise donation to make, but people have that right. So what is exploitation? It's the improper use of the property and resources through forgery, fraud, etc. The most prevalent form of self-reported form, as we found in the New York State study, we believe that it has the most devastating effects. And let me explain briefly why. With verbal abuse, you can separate yourself from the person, or you may be able to. Neglect, you may be able to get other forms of medication. You may be able to heal those wounds, as with physical bruises, broken bones heal. But financial exploitation, especially with older adults or vulnerable adults who have very few resources, if you take all the money of a 32-year-old, they can go back to work. They may be able to access other resources and recoup from that, from credit card debt, from scams, from just plain out theft. If you're 82 years old, let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, who's going to hire you so that you can bring new resources in? You may have to give up your home because you can't pay your taxes. You may stop going to your doctor because you can't afford the copay. You may be able to not access your medications that you need because you have to choose between food and medication. So the devastating, far-reaching effects of financial exploitation, we feel, really is the most of any form of abuse. And as I said before, it's often linked to other forms. Keep your eyes and ears open when you meet with your clients, when you meet with your friends and your family, and realize this is a very devastating problem. Most often, we're talking about not a holdup on the street. We're not talking about a home invasion robbery. What we're talking about here with exploitation is it's most often done with someone who has a level of trust. That could be a professional. It could be a lawyer. It could be a caregiver in the home. It could be, and most often is, sadly, a family member. It could even be sometimes a scammer who calls and plays on a person's loneliness or depression and befriends them over the phone and convinces them to send money to some worthwhile cause or some charity. So that level of trust is a critical factor, and I'll reference that later too in terms of interventions. That's who we really look for. It's someone who's been able to get into the person's life. Or the victim is impaired in some way and they really don't understand anymore financial transactions that they make. There's been some work done recently by Dr. Peter Lichtenberg and some others who seem to indicate that people with early onset cognitive impairments like a dementia actually are more vulnerable to fall for scams or deceitful practices than someone who, again, maybe has advanced Alzheimer's disease, who really doesn't even know where to sign on his checkbook. So something to keep in the back of your mind, Dr. Peter Lichtenberg and some of his work. But what are we talking about here? The most frequent forms that we see or relevant pieces are, number one, power of attorney abuse. And every state, their power of attorney is a little bit different. For example, in Texas, there is a healthcare power of attorney and there is a financial power of attorney. In New York, a power of attorney is strictly a fiduciary instrument. You have to have a healthcare proxy to make healthcare decisions. So when we talk about POA abuse, you need to find out what are the laws in your state that hold a agent, the person who becomes power of attorney for the older adult, what holds them accountable. Because it's just, in many, many states, it's just like being a co-signer on a bank account. You have equal access unless the power of attorney document has certain limitations written in there. So if you have a client that you suspect is being exploited, if you have someone who's declared that their son, daughter, grandchild, neighbor is a POA, ask for a copy of the document. It's a legal document, or in some cases, if it was done by an attorney, it may be at your county clerk's office. And take a look at that and see what powers have granted to the power of attorney. Many times, POAs are misunderstood. And I have heard many times from abusers, no, you can't come out and visit my grandmother, I'm power of attorney. To which I will say, well, I'm glad that you can handle the finances. I hope you're doing it well, but you are not her guardian. You cannot stop me from accessing her if she wishes to see me, or if she's coming to my office for a meeting. You cannot stop her with a POA alone. So a lot of misperceptions, but we see a lot of POA abuse, and in some states, prosecuting those cases is very difficult. Stealing, deception, fooling them, fooling the older adult or the vulnerable adult into believing that, in fact, their money is going for groceries. Just give me a signed check, auntie, and then I'll fill in the amount for the groceries, and the receipt is never given. Or just plain out theft. The older adult, the vulnerable adult, has their purse sitting over there, and the individual goes in and takes cash out. Not all the cash, but some of it. So just straight out stealing or deception, fooling them. Scams and other fraudulent activities, I think many of us have heard in the news. Scams, home contractor scams. We've heard of paving scams, the gypsies. We've also heard of the phone scams like the grandchild is in jail in Canada. You need to go to Western Union or get a green dot card and call back and give the number out. We need to make not only the people on this phone call aware, but we need to know our clients and our neighbors and our friends that is a scam. And the press is out there with it, but still we see a lot of victims who still are falling for that. The best takeaway I can think of is I taught my mother-in-law this, and lo and behold, she got a phone call. And she thought it was her grandson, my nephew. But then she remembered, oh, Art told me in the middle of this, where our nephew was saying he was in jail in Ottawa, was she said to him, John, just one question. What's the name of your dog? A piece of information that only that grandchild would know. And of course, the scammers immediately hung up on her. But she was going to go for it. She believed it was really John because it sounded like him. Find for your victims or your clients one piece of information that only they would know about that alleged grandchild, and then have them recite it back to you. So, and enabling, and we'll get to that in a little bit too. Enabling families are multi-layered and very difficult to deal with because it's an ingrained social behavior. It's a learned behavior that goes far and above just deception or stealing or simple scams. Points to remember. Here's the three main things that we sort of the fork in the road of, do we consider it abuse or do we consider it just a choice? What is the intent of the abuser? And I put that, as you can see, in exclamation points. It can be the exploiter. Do they know what they're doing? Are they purposely taking the money? Do they, are they using it for drugs or gambling? What is their intent? They know what they're doing. The second is, in some way, they have power and control over the victim. And we've heard this with younger domestic violence victims. If you look at that power and control wheel, financial abuse is one of the pieces. Do they control transportation? Do they control communication with the older adult? The landline is out of the house now. And you as a therapist to set up a meeting have to call, and it's always the granddaughter who answers the phone, and controls whether you're able to talk to grandma or not, or whether she's coming into your office to meet with you or you do a home visit. Power and control, transportation, communication, access to the individual, and often they will block it. And is there some gain for the abuser? Often in financial situations, it's pretty obvious what that gain is. They either feel entitled to that money, or they have a problem handling money, and they see the older individual, if you will, as their piggy bank. And again, as I had said before, and I can't emphasize this enough, it's a person with a trusting relationship with that victim. Hint, takeaway, when you talk with the alleged or suspected abuser, please, folks, listen for statements. A probation officer taught me this once. Listen for the yeah buts. Listen for the yeah buts. So when you ask them about, the mortgage isn't paid, the gas and electric, the taxes, what's happening there, your power of attorney, and they'll say, yeah, I haven't paid it, but the bank account is depleted. She's bounced 5 checks. Yeah, but I had listened for what they're doing there, ladies and gentlemen. They're admitting to you that they took the money, and now they're trying to manipulate you and deceive you into believing why it's okay that they access the funds from their relative or their friend or their neighbor. Listen for the yeah buts, the best takeaway, practical takeaway I can give you. What are the risk factors we look for? Well, in fact, as Rita said earlier with her mom, dementia. Law enforcement has told me many times, along with district attorneys, victims with dementia are the perfect victims because often they cannot testify in court. Often they cannot give a crime report because they do not remember the sequence of events or exactly did they sign the check, did they give permission or not. They are in many ways the perfect victim, and it derails criminal prosecution. Isolated, as I said, geographically, it could be at a farm in North Dakota. It can be a high-rise in the middle of Manhattan. You can isolate an older adult, an older victim, unlike a child who goes to school or a younger DV victim who may work or be active with the neighbors. Older adults or a vulnerable adult can be easily, socially, geographically isolated, as I said, like with transportation, and now cell phones being used and the landline is taken out. Look also for drug or alcohol abuse, not only with the perpetrator, the exploiter, but now more and more we see with the victims themselves that makes them dependent on their exploiter to keep them supplied with alcohol, to keep them in their homes, and that's often the threat. So that makes them much more vulnerable. Here's the family types that we talk about and all types of elder abuse, and I'll hone in on financial in particular. The stressed caregiver. Used to be believed that about 90% of all forms of elder abuse, including exploitation, were just a stressed caregiver, where the stressed caregiver would say, oh, I just lost it, I just snapped, I just acted impulsively. Well, in fact, that's been debunked. That is not true. Only about maybe 15 to 20% of all types of elder abuse, neglect, exploitation are in fact stressed caregivers. We don't believe younger abusers, domestic violence abusers, child abusers who say, I just snapped and hit my child. We hold them accountable. I just took the money of my 50-year-old dad because you know what, he really doesn't need it. He's got plenty of money. I was just stressed out and I needed to get away for a while. Domestic violence in later life, husbands who sadly often have the pensions, the health care, and they control the money and don't allow their wives to access that for their own health care needs. And what we call the pathological abuser. Please don't get upset with me with this title, ladies and gentlemen. I do not mean to demean anyone that has a pathology, but it's just a general statement. An abuser, an exploiter who has an untreated substance abuse, mental health, or gambling addiction, and often linked to an enabling family system. They are dependent on the older adult because of their illness, because of their their problem that they have, they are reliant on their older parent, grandparent for housing, for financial support, because they are not able to hold a job or to be able to, at this point, to integrate in society. I'm not blaming them for their sickness, but I'm just saying that is a family type. Enabling families, you can read this, and in fact, the victim knows where the money's being used, but they make a conscious choice. As I said, it's often a long-established family pattern, and in many ways, those of you with alcohol and drug treatment may need to address that enabling, social enabling behavior before you even get to the exploitation, because they really feel that they're helping. They want to help the person. They don't want to see them in a snowbank or out on the street. In fact, what they're really doing, as I say in here, is they're allowing that family member to self-destruct. As I said to one victim one time who was an enabler, I said, you know, that heroin that your daughter is taking is the gun. By you continually giving her the money, you know she's buying heroin, you're giving her the bullets to put in the gun that's going to harm her. And that was the wake-up call for that particular victim who had never reframed it like that. They just felt that they were keeping their daughter off of the street and not dead. It's a horrible choice to make. Often we have to wait as professionals for the crisis to occur and then make the changes in the bank accounts, powers of attorney, and talk with the victim, because that shakes up the family system enough to allow us to get access and breaks for a short period of time that family dynamic. Self-determination versus exploitation. Does the victim have capacity? We all have capacity. We're competent, okay? Well, you know what? Do you understand what your options are? Do you understand that by continuing, you're aware that your nephew is draining your bank account and has taken your life savings? Do you understand that you may lose your home? You may be evicted from your apartment. Do you understand the consequences of those actions? Yes, I do. Okay, here's your choices, A, B, and C. Which do you choose? I want to still allow him to have access. As long as you understand the consequences, okay, will you accept some help? Will you accept some help in trying to manage your money? Well, maybe I will, maybe I won't. Are there legal options that exist? Again, the advanced directives like healthcare proxy, powers of attorney, and in the most extreme cases, guardianship, where a financial guardian may be appointed and can look at all of the bank records. But we all have a right, as I said earlier, with money in our society to make choices. Money equates to choices in America, and the more money you have, the more choices you have. If you're older and you lose all of your money, your choices are much more limited. What is consent? Well, that victim that we deal with, that younger adult or the vulnerable elderly person, they have to be able to give it freely, knowingly, and voluntarily. They cannot be pressured. They cannot be threatened. They cannot be coerced. And they must really have the capacity to understand those consequences. If your client, if your family member really is starting to become very forgetful, if they've had a series of strokes, maybe they have Parkinson's disease or any number of other diseases, do they really have the ability to understand those choices that they're making? Interventions, because I'm going to wind it up here in roughly within the next 5 to 10 minutes. What are your choices? Well, they're dependent on it depends on the type of exploitation and the ability of the victim to pursue it. Are they so impaired that they can't, or do they not wish to? Know your laws, ladies and gentlemen. Do a little time, go on the internet, talk with people in your community, know your laws in terms of what options, legal options might be available. Because very often with financial exploitation, there's civil and there's criminal. Do you have mandatory reporting laws for financial exploitation of vulnerable adults where you have to call APS? Do a little Googling and find out what are the professional types that need to be a mandated reporter. If your client comes into your office and says, you know, I'm sorry I can't come in for the next month, I have to move because I haven't paid my bills, and you ask them why, well, someone has been stealing all my money and my Social Security check and pension are all gone. Well, if you suspect financial exploitation, are you required by law for your state, not your profession necessarily, but by your state, to be a mandated reporter, and 49 states in the U.S. have some sort of mandatory reporting for elder abuse in the community, just like nursing home abuse, all 50 states have it. And the Affordable Care Act now says it for long-term care facilities, and child abuse. So check and see. The only state, by the way, that doesn't have mandatory reporting for elder abuse in the community is New York. Understand the underlying issues, as we said, like with scams or loneliness. Some people are willing to part with their money or be played in order to have a voice on the phone. To have a relative who may have a problem be the only relative in the area because everyone else has moved. They're willing to pay the price just to have human company again. Are they afraid because the exploiter has threatened a nursing home? If I don't hand over the deed to the house, I'm going to be placed in a nursing home. And probably the most salient one that I can give is gain the trust of your client or the victim. It is a counterbalance, ladies and gentlemen, to the taking away of the trust that the perpetrator has done. Think about it. A lawyer, a caregiver, a family member has betrayed that trust that you had in them. The older adult, the vulnerable adult feels like a fool. They feel foolish. They feel that they've been taken advantage of, which they have. The only thing you might be able to do to get them to do something to change that balance is get their trust and realize that they can trust in what you say and that you're someone who is not going to re-victimize them. Clearly explain their options, again, looking at the laws, looking at community resources like offices for aging, adult protective services, and others. Find out, are there money management programs? Is there a good family member that's out of town that can become power of attorney and help them out? APS, often misunderstood. There's a little bit of flack in the background there. I hope I can talk over it.
Yeah,
in most states,
you may want to
yes.
mute your volume, Rita.
Whoever is doing that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Thank you. APS. I do a lot of work with adult protective services, very misunderstood, very maligned. In fact, they are a wonderful resource. In most communities, as you see on the screen who they serve, although some states do older adults individually, in most states the criteria, if you're going to call in a victim, you need to hit all three of these criteria for them to take it. Okay? There's the impairment, the inability to meet their needs, could be food, could be paying their bills, and no one able to willingly or responsibly assist to address that imminent risk in number two. Myths about APS, that they're the same as child protective. They can remove a victim from their home, even if the person doesn't want to go. Well, no, they're not. If they're an adult, they have a right, as long as they're competent, to stay where they are. They're the right to continue to be victimized like a younger domestic violence victim if they know their options, which you, through a trusting relationship, can build with them. That APS can make somebody stop giving money to another person. No, you can't. No, they can't. They do not have that powers. They're a wonderful resource. They can do what they can do within their state laws. And please, get to know them, give them a call. So what can you do in your community, in your town, in your state? Many hands make light work. I've listed up here many different options for you. See if you can join and find out what exists, what coalitions to fight financial exploitation of elderly and vulnerable adults exist. Is it through law enforcement? Is it through Office on Aging, APS? And join those groups. Become educated. Know exactly what you can and can't do. Understand that you can get the word out about to yourself or your loved ones that, you know what, practical advice, scams, if it's too good to be true, don't believe it. Check out caregivers. If they're coming in the home to care for an older relative while you're working or you're at your job, if they're going to bring a caregiver in, it's easy to find someone very inexpensive through the Situations Wanted. That's very dangerous. You need to do a background check and find out, because this person's going to build trust and have access to personal information and finances of the older adult. If you have an older adult or client, get an opportunity, if they're willing to share it with you, look over the bank statements or have their banker or a trusted relative Look over monthly bank statements and see if there's anything out of the ordinary. Most of us pay bills in a very orderly, routine way, with a few exceptions. If there's something really out of the ordinary and round figure deductions, that should set off red flags. So looking at those bank statements, credit card statements, is really a first good way to see if something's going on. And then, as I put, whatever, thank you Taylor Swift, whatever else is in your community. So the two primary reasons you should get on board with this: it makes your work easier, and it can provide better, more comprehensive help to our clients. And isn't that what we're really being paid for in our work? To help our clients. So let's work together. There's some barriers, lack of trust, terminology. I don't want to do an SAR and the PRI to do an APS. What does that mean? Let's talk in plain English. And what is it going to be for my work? So get involved, please. Do I have the time? Think about it, folks. How much time, if you really did a cost analysis or your time work analysis, do you have with it? Maybe you spend on the computer checking out personal things or chatting and socializing in the office. Do you have the time? If it's a priority, if financial exploitation and helping your clients not be victimized is a priority, you will make time. Are there any comments, questions? If so, I will. If not, I will turn it over to Rita again, and she can follow up. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy this. Hope you learned something.
That was wonderful. It really was. Thank you so very much, Art. I didn't mention to everyone, those of you who have been with us in the past would know that we save time to do Q&A at the end. So I'm going to finish up before we take all those questions. You can type them into the question box. I'm going to do one last poll asking you what surprised you the most. And if it's not on my answer list, you can put it in the question box. So here's what I offered you. What surprised you the most about financial elder abuse? Okay. Okay. The votes are coming in. And about 50%, over 50% of you have voted. I'll give you a few more seconds. And then we will go to the questions. Type any questions you have in the question box, and we will be asking them in 1 minute, or answering them in 1 minute. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to close it and share it with you. So the majority of you were surprised about adult protective services. I was surprised and disappointed. I guess that most of us working in this field realize how often it is perpetrated by the family member. And over a quarter of you felt that most of it was surprising. So let me go ahead and hide this. And before we go ahead and do the Q&A, explain to all of you that aren't familiar with financial social work that we offer a certification that includes 20 CEUs from National NASW. It is self-study and self-paced. Our students have 6 months to complete it, and there is an online final exam that students have 2 weeks to complete. And you can see here that our curriculum has been taught at the University of Kentucky since 2011, so that's around 7 years. The financial social work is in Wikipedia and in the online encyclopedia of social work. And we are proud of all of those things. And the cost has remained at $495 for the past 4 years. So let's go ahead and move on to Q&A. Why I can't move on to Q&A, I don't know. Okay, let's put up the questions. Let's see. Okay, questions. Torley, can you get those questions up? I'm having trouble doing it.
Okay, well, I think one question is, I think one of the biggest challenges in determining financial exploitation is exposing undue influence and coercion. How can that pressure be separated from a self-determined decision?
Art?
You want me to read that again, Art?
Nope. Probably, and I certainly have had cases of undue influence. The key piece there is breaking the isolation. I mentioned that as one of the risk factors. You're absolutely correct. Self-determination, if a person wants to do that, but often with the undue influence, it is that control and that isolating of the older individual or the victim. You need to think very creatively, and that's why I talk about collaborating, to try to get other people in to access that victim and build that trust to counter it off, because the perpetrator has often jettisoned family members or blocked family members or friends from visiting. And you need to know the rights that that person has. You need to look at trusted individuals in their life. Many older adults, for example, a good way to access them is, do they have church or synagogue faith-based past? See if a church member can go in. Do they have a long-time lawyer who's not aware of what's going on? A physician. Again, I understand HIPAA, okay, but to let them know that perhaps this person is having some medical problems. You can let a doctor know that. That's not breaking HIPAA. But you just can't share specific information. There are federal statutes that allow for the sharing of some limited information of HIPAA. So you're right, it's very difficult because that's Svengali isolation. It's breaking the isolation and trying to, little by little, build a trusting relationship to counterbalance what the exploiter's influence is over them. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Art. Another question is, what can I do if I suspect financial abuse but have no concrete proof to report?
The best thing that you can do is continue to gather as much information as you can. As I said, financial exploitation of all the types, if you're able to even get a little bit, a bank statement, a credit card statement, if you're able to get a release of information from the victim to be able to talk to their local credit union or bank, or if they have a financial manager, and just say, you know what, I'm just wondering, I hope I'm wrong, but Mrs. Jones, a number of very odd things have been going on here. And I'm wondering if you might help me because you have a long-standing relationship with her. If you could take a look, and if in fact, something's come up, there are mandatory reporting laws in this state, or you might be able to speak with her and ask her exactly where are these big withdrawals coming from. You need to find some concrete way, or her to make a statement to you. Please remember that most victims are not going to say, my grandson is stealing from me. They're going to say, well, they've gone through 3 jobs, they're living with me, and now they're very dependent on me. Or, I don't know where he got the money from, but he just bought a new car. Something that again, is out of the ordinary, that would not follow a normal financial process of spending and expenditures of your victim. But you're right, very, very difficult to break through that isolation.
Thank you, Art. Another person is asking, is it not also important to ask the power of attorney for the legal documentation that they are the legal POA?
Well, in some states, they can, absolutely. If you can get that, if you can get the advance directive from them and say, you know what, I'm meeting with your grandmother and helping her, and as part of our policy and procedure here at my practice, we'd like to have copies of all advanced directive, like the healthcare proxy, POAs, things like that. In some states, yes, they have to give it up. In New York recently, the power of attorney law was changed, and in fact, upon demand by certain individuals or groups like Adult Protective or other social services, you can ask for an accounting by the power of attorney. Often, if they're an exploiter, they disappear because now the light is being shed on that. But not all states would require a POA to produce that instrument unless a court asked for it. Even the police might ask for it, and if the state law doesn't require them, the exploiter does not have to produce it. But ask if there is one, because sometimes people will say, I have a POA, and they don't. And it's a smoke screen, it's another deception, just like they're deceiving the victim to try to throw you off of the scent.
Wow. Thank you, Art. Another question. With respect to financial abuse co-occurring with other abuses, I worry about addressing this and the other abuses increasing.
That's always should be a paramount. We never want to put our clients, our victims, at higher risk than when we had interaction with them initially. So if you happen to do a home visit, please make sure that the perpetrator is not, oh, I'll just go in the other room, or in a case I had, the relative said, I'll just go upstairs, and they were listening through the heating vent. Never leave the person at higher risk. You can ask them if you are one-on-one and alone, and you can ask them, but don't say, is Johnny abusing or financially exploiting me? They're going to defend Johnny. Don't accuse Johnny. Ask them more general questions like, you know, I've noticed that you haven't been, you mentioned you're not taking your pain medication as much. Why is that? You know, are you not able to get to the drugstore? Why aren't you taking your pain medication? And then listen for the answer and see if that links. Keep it in the back of your mind to they don't have the money to pay for it, or Sally is stealing it and selling it on the street. Listen and try to find a backdoor way to address the issue, but never in the presence of a, quote, caregiver or perpetrator bring that up, because it's going to put them at higher risk. They walk out the door, you stay in your office. Guess what's going to happen to Grandma when she gets home?
Review. Yeah. Thank you. Another question. If I suspect exploitation, what are my next steps? What can I expect from the agencies that I contact?
Well, with again, depending on your state law and what it says about reporting, certainly Adult Protective Services, if they're a vulnerable adult or they have, as I had outlined in the slide presentation, they meet those criteria, and that's really how you have to call that in. Financial exploitation can leave a person very vulnerable to homelessness, to no heat in the winter, and if there's no one able to do that. So you need to know your state laws. You need to know your community resources. Calling the Office on Aging, or even just calling Adult Protective and saying, let me run this scenario by you. I want to stay anonymous if you want to do that. This is what's going on. Frame it in terms of the criteria for your state and see what they suggest. Very often APS workers are willing to sort of, brainstorm with you and say, well, maybe this needs to be done, or they'll say, is there another family member you could reach out to? Is there a banker? Is there someone that you might be able to connect with that might be able to intervene? So know your community resources, rural, urban, or anything in between. APS is in every county and every state. Give them a call and just say, I want to run it by you, and see. That's a good starting point.